What's up, Echo family? Before we dive in, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this video around. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far the Darkened Echo spreads. Let's keep the energy strong and keep this channel growing. I travel often for work, and because of that, I've stayed in every kind of hotel you can imagine, from small roadside motels to grand, historic buildings in the middle of busy cities. But one night, in a mid-sized business hotel off the highway, I had an experience I'll never forget. It was about 2 years ago. I was driving across states for a client meeting, and I booked a one-night stay at a place I found online. The photos looked average. Nothing fancy, nothing suspicious. When I pulled into the parking lot around 10:30 p.m., I noticed right away how empty it was. Only a handful of cars, the building towering over them with most of its windows completely dark. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights above. The man at the front desk seemed distracted. He didn't greet me like most hotel staff usually do. He just slid a form toward me, asked me to sign, and handed over a key card. His eyes kept darting to the security monitors behind him, but when I glanced at the screens, the feeds were fuzzy, static, and flickering like old VHS tapes. I remember asking, "Is everything okay with the cameras?" He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just interference. Happens sometimes. I didn't push. I was exhausted. My room was on the 4th floor, at the very end of a long hallway. The carpet there was damp in patches like it had been cleaned recently, but not dried properly. Every step made a faint squishing sound. When I slid the key card in and opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the cold. Not just chilly, freezing like the air conditioning was blasting. But when I checked the unit, it wasn't even on. The curtains were drawn tight, yet the room seemed dim, as if some kind of shadow clung to the corners. I unpacked, tried to shake it off, and decided to shower before bed. That's when things got wrong. As I stood under the water, I heard movement in the room. At first, I thought maybe the pipes were shifting, but the sound was unmistakable. Footsteps on carpet. Slow, deliberate, pacing. I turned off the shower, dripping, straining to hear. Nothing. I pulled the curtain back. The bathroom door, which I'd left cracked open, was now wide open. I told myself it was the draft from the vent. I got dressed quickly and climbed into bed, leaving the lamp on. Sleep didn't come easy. At some point in the night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. My eyes shot open, and I froze. The whispering wasn't outside. It was in the room. Low, murmuring voices like two people talking just beside the bed. I turned my head slowly and saw nothing, but the air had changed. It felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I sat up, heart racing, and reached for my phone. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The notepad and pen on the desk by the TV. I hadn't touched them earlier, but now, scribbled across the top page in shaky, uneven handwriting were the words, "Leave now." I scrambled out of bed, grabbed my bag, and bolted. As I opened the door into the hallway, I felt, and I swear this is true, fingers brushed the back of my neck, ice cold like someone was right behind me. I didn't look back. I ran to the elevator, punched the button, then gave up and took the stairs 4 floors down. At the front desk, the same clerk sat there, staring at me. He didn't even look surprised. He just slid a new receipt across the counter and said, "No refund after check-in." I didn't argue. I drove half the night to another town and slept in my car at a rest stop. The next morning, out of curiosity, I looked up reviews of the hotel. Buried deep in the comments, I found a single 1-star review that chilled me to my core. It read, "Don't stay in room 404. I woke up to voices and writing on the notepad too. They warned me, but I stayed. The next morning, my window was open and my things were rearranged. I left immediately. Don't risk it. I don't know what's in that room. but I will never forget the feeling of that cold hand brushing my neck. I used to work for a pharmaceutical company that frequently sent me to medical conferences. One particular trip took me to a coastal city where the only available accommodations were in an old Victorian-style hotel, the kind that prided itself on historic charm. From the moment I walked in, I could tell the building hadn't been updated in decades. The carpet was threadbare, the wallpaper peeling in long strips, and the chandeliers gave off a weak amber glow. Despite all that, the staff insisted it was a landmark with character. I was given room 217, located on the second floor at the very end of Crooked Hallway. The receptionist, an older woman with an oddly serious expression, hesitated before handing me the key. She said in a low voice, "If anything feels strange, keep the window closed and the lights on." Then she looked away, as if she'd already said too much. I laughed nervously, thinking it was just a local superstition. But when I got to the room, that comment replayed in my mind. The room itself looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. Heavy velvet drapes, a tall antique wardrobe, and a large bed with a carved wooden headboard. The only modern touch was a small flat-screen TV. That night, after my conference sessions, I returned to the room and tried to sleep. Around midnight, I woke to the distinct sound of the window creaking open. I was sure I'd latched it earlier. When I sat up, the drapes were billowing inward as though someone had climbed in, but the street below was 3 stories down, and the drop was sheer. I got up, shut the window tight, and turned on the bedside lamp. That's when I noticed something on the wardrobe mirror across the room. A handprint. Clear, fresh, smeared against the glass, but shaped strangely, with fingers longer than normal and thin, almost skeletal. I froze. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of an old wall clock. Then came the whisper, a man's voice, low, broken, as if carried on the air from nowhere in particular. "Get out of my bed." The lamp flickered violently. My heart slammed against my ribs. The bed beneath me shifted as though something heavy had just sat down beside me. I could feel the weight compress the mattress, sinking it down inches away from where I sat frozen. I bolted upright, grabbed my bag, and ran for the hallway. But when I yanked the door open, I nearly collapsed. Standing directly across the hall was a figure, impossibly tall, thin as a rail, its head tilted sharply to one side. The dim corridor light showed a face that wasn't a face at all, a pale smear, like melted wax with no features. It didn't move. It just stood there, blocking the path to the staircase. I slammed the door shut, shaking uncontrollably, and locked it. The only thing I could do was huddle by the lamp until dawn. When the sun finally rose, the figure was gone. I checked out immediately. On my way out, I asked the receptionist, the same woman who had warned me about the window, if she'd ever seen anything strange. She avoided my eyes and simply said, "Room 217 has a history. You should be thankful it let you leave." I've stayed in many hotels since then, but never again in one that advertises historic charm. Some history is better left buried. Back when I was in college, I took a summer job that required constant traveling. The company didn't care much about where we stayed, as long as it was cheap. That's how I ended up in one of the worst motels I've ever seen. A squat, 2-story building off a rural highway, with flickering neon lights spelling out vacancy. The moment I checked in, I knew something was off. The man at the front desk barely spoke, his face pale and expressionless. He gave me an actual metal key, not a key card, and muttered, "Second floor, room 12. The stairwell smelled like mildew and cigarettes, and the carpet was stained dark in long, irregular patches. As I walked down the hall, I noticed something strange. Every door had scuff marks near the bottom, as though people had been kicking to get out. My room looked even worse. The wallpaper peeled in jagged curls. and the air smelled metallic, like rust or old blood. The TV didn't work. The only thing in decent shape was the bedspread, which looked newer than everything else. Too new, as if it was hiding something. I was so exhausted from the drive that I told myself I'd just sleep and leave first thing in the morning. But sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was faint at first, like nails against wood. Then it grew louder, scraping across the floor under the bed. I sat up, frozen. The scratching stopped. Then came a knock from inside the wardrobe. I told myself I was imagining it. But then I heard again, louder, more urgent. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. Summoning what little courage I had. I got up and yanked the wardrobe doors open. It was empty, but carved deep into the back panel were the words, "Help me." Before I could even process it, the TV, which had been dead earlier, flickered on by itself. A snowy screen filled the room, and through the static, a man's voice whispered, "Don't look under the bed." My chest tightened. My first instinct was to run, but something inside me, curiosity, maybe, made me glance down. The bed skirt hung low, shadows pooling beneath it. Slowly, I crouched and lifted the edge of the fabric. What I saw made me stumble back, so hard I hit the wall. Lying there, inches from my face, was a man's head. His eyes were wide open, bloodshot, and his mouth stretched into a silent scream. His skin was gray, decomposed, but his eyes followed me as I scrambled to my feet. The TV shut off. The scratching started again, louder than ever. I didn't stop to grab anything. I ran out of the room barefoot, down the hall, and out the door into the night. Later, when I tried to leave a review online, I found that the motel had been closed for years. Condemned. The listing I had booked from was fake, a leftover page that should have been taken down. But here's the part that still haunts me. The exact words carved into that wardrobe, "Help me," appeared in other people's stories online too. And always, it was in room 12. During one of my work trips a few years back, I stayed in a luxury hotel downtown. Compared to the cheap motels I was used to, this place was another world. Polished marble floors, a lobby chandelier that sparkled like diamonds, and staff dressed in crisp uniforms. Everything screamed comfort and safety. Or at least, that's what I thought. I checked in late, around 11 p.m., and the lobby was nearly empty. The concierge handed me my key card and said, 17th floor. Elevators to your right. I headed over, wheeling my small suitcase behind me. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped in. The inside was spotless, mirrored walls, a faint smell of lavender. I pressed the button for my floor and leaned against the railing, yawning. But just as the doors began to close, a pale hand slipped between them, triggering the sensor. A woman stepped inside. She was dressed in a plain gray dress that looked outdated, like something from the 1960s. Her hair was dark and hung limp over her shoulders, partially obscuring her face. She didn't press any buttons. She just stood there, silent, her head slightly bowed. I gave her a polite nod, but she didn't acknowledge me. The elevator began to move. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she had already pressed her floor earlier. But then I noticed something strange. The floor indicator wasn't moving. It was stuck on 17, even though I knew we hadn't stopped yet. The hum of the elevator grew louder, almost like it was grinding against metal. The lights flickered. The woman beside me slowly raised her head, and that's when I saw her face, or rather, the lack of it. Her skin was smooth, featureless, like wax melted across where her eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. My stomach dropped. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the mirrored wall. She tilted her head toward me, as though seeing me without eyes. Then she whispered in a muffled, breathless voice, "Don't get off on 17." The lights cut out completely. For a few seconds, I was trapped in pitch-black darkness with her. I could hear her breathing, ragged, wet, right beside my ear. When the lights flickered back, the elevator doors were open. The panel glowed faintly. Floor 17. The hallway outside stretched into shadows, the carpet darker than the others I'd passed, with half the lights burned out. The woman was gone. I don't even remember making the decision, but I bolted. I hit the button for the lobby, praying the doors would shut before anything else happened. As the elevator descended, I felt an icy pressure around my wrist, as though someone was trying to hold me back. But when I looked, nothing. I rushed out the moment the doors opened into the bright, safe glow of the lobby. The night clerk gave me a puzzled look as I stumbled to the desk, pale and shaking. I asked him directly, "What's on the 17th floor?" His face changed instantly. The color drained from his cheeks, and he stammered, There is no 17th floor. It's sealed off. Has been for decades." I checked out first thing the next morning. To this day, I can't ride in an elevator without staring at the numbers, making sure nothing extra appears. A few years ago, I was driving cross-country and decided to stop for the night at a medium-sized business hotel just outside of St. Louis. Nothing special, just a clean place to sleep. When I asked the receptionist for a room, she hesitated, glanced at her computer, then said, "We have one left, room 6 on the ground floor." I didn't think much of it at the time. She gave me the key card quickly, almost like she wanted to be done with the transaction. Room 6 was at the far end of a quiet hallway. The carpet leading up to it was darker than the rest, and the lights overhead flickered more than usual. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I got a strange, heavy feeling in my chest, the same feeling you get when someone is staring at you. The room itself looked ordinary enough. A queen-sized bed, a dresser with a mirror, a TV bolted to the wall. But the smell was unusual. It wasn't mildew or smoke. It was something metallic, faint but sharp like dry blood. I set my bag down and noticed something odd right away. The Bible in the nightstand drawer was missing. Every hotel room I'd ever been in had one, but here there was just an empty space. That night, after showering, I crawled into bed and tried to sleep. At exactly 3:07 a.m., I woke to the sound of the TV turning on by itself. The screen glowed with static, filling the room with white noise. I grabbed the remote to turn it off, but the buttons didn't work. Then, in the static, an image flickered in and out. A hotel room. My hotel room, except the bed was empty, and the bathroom door was slowly creaking open. I froze, staring at the screen, when suddenly the TV cut to black. The reflection in the screen showed me sitting on the bed, but there was someone else standing behind me. I spun around. The room was empty. My heart pounded in my throat. I shoved my belongings back into my bag, ready to leave, when I noticed something I hadn't before. The carpet under the bed wasn't flush with the rest. It was bulging slightly, like it had been pulled up and laid back down. Against every instinct I had, I lifted the edge of the bedspread and peeled back the carpet. What I saw made my blood run cold. Underneath the carpet was a massive, dark stain. It had seeped deep into the concrete. No cleaning would ever remove it. I didn't stick around to find out what caused it. I grabbed my stuff and left the room immediately. The receptionist barely looked at me when I slammed the key down on the counter. On my way out, though, curiosity got the better of me. I asked, "What's the history of room 6? She looked at me like I had said something insane. Then she whispered, "Sir, there is no room 6. We haven't had that on the system for years." I never argued. I just left. But the key card in my pocket the next morning still read, "Room 6. Back in 2018, I had a business trip that brought me to a historic hotel in Savannah, Georgia. The place was beautiful on the outside. Tall white columns, iron balconies, and vines crawling up the walls. It was one of those hotels that leaned heavily into its haunted history for tourists. But I wasn't there for ghost tours. I just wanted a decent night's sleep. At check-in, the receptionist smiled warmly and handed me my key card. "You'll be in room 214, she said. But as I turned to leave, she lowered her voice and added, "If anything feels strange, don't engage. Just ignore it." That comment unsettled me, but I brushed it off. Room 214 was at the very end of a long hallway. The corridor smelled faintly of lemon polish, but underneath was something heavier, like old perfume that had soaked into the walls. When I unlocked the door, the room hit me with a wave of cold air, even though the thermostat read 74 degrees. The furnishings were antique: a tall four-poster bed, a writing desk, a wardrobe with ornate carvings. Everything looked clean, but there was a strange energy, as if the air itself was watching me. I tried to relax, unpacked, and settled in a bed with my laptop. Around midnight, I started hearing footsteps in the hallway. Not unusual for a hotel, except these steps never faded. They went back and forth, right outside my door for over an hour. I finally got up and peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but just as I turned away, a knock rattled the door. 3 hard knocks, deliberate. "Hello," I called out. No answer. I should have called the front desk, but something about the silence froze me in place. Then, from behind me, the old wardrobe creaked. I turned slowly. The door was opening on its own. Inside, hanging neatly on the bar, was an old-fashioned black suit. It hadn't been there before. The fabric looked pristine, like it had just been pressed. And on the desk nearby sat a guest book, one I hadn't noticed earlier, open to a single page. Written in neat cursive was, "Mr. Alcott, 1927, checked in." There was no checked out. I told myself it had to be some kind of historic decoration, a gimmick. I forced myself back into bed, determined to ignore it. But sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up freezing. The air was so cold I could see my breath. And I wasn't alone. At the foot of the bed stood a man in that same black suit, his face pale and gaunt, eyes sunken like bruises. He stared at me with an expression that was neither angry nor kind, just empty, hollow, like a photograph come to life. I couldn't move. My body felt pinned to the mattress. He stepped closer, each movement stiff, deliberate, until he stood at my bedside. He leaned down, so close I could feel the cold radiating off him, and whispered in a rasping voice, "I never left this room. Neither will you." The lights in the room flickered violently, and in that instant, I broke free of whatever held me. I bolted upright, grabbed my bag, and fled into the hallway barefoot. The corridor was utterly silent. No footsteps, no other guests. I didn't stop running until I reached the lobby. The night clerk didn't even look surprised when I slammed the key card onto the counter. She just said quietly, "Another one from 214? When I asked her what she meant, she only shook her head and muttered, "Some guests never check out." To this day, I don't know if what I saw was a hallucination, a dream, or something far worse. But I know one thing: I'll never set foot in room 214 again. Several years ago, I was visiting a friend in Chicago and booked a room in a large hotel just a few blocks from downtown. It wasn't a cheap place. Tall glass windows, modern architecture, and a bustling lobby filled with travelers. Everything about it screamed professional and safe. I checked into room 903 on the 9th floor. The room itself was modern, clean, and quiet. After a long day, I took a shower, ordered some food, and settled in for the night. Nothing seemed unusual until I turned off the lights. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up suddenly. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I heard it, the sound of small footsteps running back and forth in the hallway. They were light and fast, like a child playing tag. I frowned, sat up in bed, and listened. The steps went past my door, stopped, then returned again. It kept repeating, the sound echoing against the walls. Annoyed, I finally got up, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Just as I was about to turn away, I caught movement in the corner of my vision. A small figure stood at the very end of the corridor. A little boy, no older than 7. He wore old-fashioned pajamas, the kind with vertical stripes and a button-up shirt. He stood perfectly still, facing my door. I blinked. In that moment, the lights above him flickered, and when they came back, he was gone. Chills crawled down my spine. I backed away from the door, convincing myself I was overtired. I climbed back into bed, leaving the lamp on this time. But sleep didn't come. At exactly 3:13 a.m., I heard knocking. Not on the door, but on the inside of the wall, right behind the headboard. Slow, deliberate knocks, like someone trapped inside the wall itself. My chest tightened as I pressed my ear against it. The knocking stopped. Then came a faint, high-pitched giggle. I leapt out of bed, heart hammering, and grabbed my things. I was ready to leave immediately, but when I turned toward the door, I froze. The boy I had seen in the hallway was now inside my room. He stood near the desk, head tilted, eyes wide and glassy. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his smile stretched unnaturally wide, too wide. In his small hand, he held the room's notepad and pen. I couldn't move as he scrawled something onto the page with quick, jerky motions. When he finished, he dropped the pen, turned, and walked straight into the wall, disappearing without a trace. Trembling, I inched forward and looked at the notepad. In messy, childlike handwriting, 3 words were written over and over again across the page. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." I didn't stay another second. I left the hotel in the middle of the night, checked into another place miles away, and didn't look back. Later, out of morbid curiosity, I searched online for the hotel's history. Buried in an old news archive was a report from the 1950s. A boy had gone missing in the hotel during a family stay. He was last seen playing in the 9th floor hallway. He was never found. Room 903 was directly across from where he had vanished. Back in 2019, I attended a tech expo in Las Vegas. I stayed in one of the massive casino hotels, the kind that feels like its own city, with endless hallways, blinking slot machines, and crowds at all hours. With so many people around, I assumed it was the safest place in the world. I was wrong. I was assigned room 1214. My floor was quiet, which was odd considering how busy the hotel was. Most of the other rooms seemed empty. After unpacking, I decided to grab a late-night snack. When I returned, I stepped into the elevator and pressed 12. But the elevator didn't stop at 12. Instead, it kept going up, the digital display skipping past 13, 14, 15, until it stopped at 19. Confused, I stepped out. The hallway was completely dark, except for one flickering bulb far down the corridor. The carpet was different, old, patterned in faded red and gold, unlike the modern blue on the other floors. All the doors were unmarked, no numbers, just plain wood. A heavy silence pressed down on me, broken only by the hum of the dying light. I turned to go back into the elevator, but the doors had already closed. I jabbed the button frantically. Nothing. The elevator wouldn't return. As I stood there, trying to calm myself, I noticed one of the doors slowly creaking open. A sliver of light spilled out, yellow, dim, like from an old lamp. Against every instinct, I stepped closer. Inside, I glimpsed a room frozen in time. Rotary phone, black and white TV, floral curtains straight from the 1960s. And sitting on the bed was a woman in a long nightgown, her back to me. She brushed her hair in long, slow strokes. I whispered, "Hello? I think I'm lost." She stopped brushing. The air in the hall grew ice cold. Without turning, she said in a voice that didn't sound entirely human, low, echoing, layered, "You shouldn't be here. They don't like visitors." The door slammed shut. At that exact moment, The other doors along the hallway began to rattle violently, as though dozens of people were trapped inside, pounding to get out. The bulb overhead flickered faster, and in the stuttering light, I saw them, shadowy figures seeping out from beneath the doors, crawling into the corridor. I ran. My hands shook as I slammed the elevator button again and again, praying it would come back. Just before the figures reached me, the doors slid open. I dove inside, pounding the lobby button. The elevator plummeted down, lights flickering wildly. When the doors opened, I staggered out into the brightly lit casino floor, gasping for air. People bustled around me, oblivious. I turned back. The elevator display didn't even have a button, 419. Later, I asked the front desk about it. The clerk froze, then muttered, "There is no 19th floor. That section's been locked for decades. You shouldn't have been able to get there." I left the next morning, and to this day, when I ride elevators, I never look too closely at the floor numbers, because sometimes they'll take you somewhere you're not supposed to go. This happened in 2016 when I was traveling for work in New Orleans. The company booked me in a tall, historic hotel right in the French Quarter. From the outside, it was stunning. Wrought iron balconies, hanging plants, jazz music drifting up from the street. But on the inside, it had that heavy, old-world air, like too much history was packed into its walls. I was assigned room 1109, high up with a view of the street below. After checking in, I went straight to bed, exhausted from the trip. Around 1 a.m., the phone on the nightstand rang, jolting me awake. I answered groggily. "Room service," a man's voice said. Confused, I told him I hadn't ordered anything. There was a pause, then the voice repeated, flat and monotone. "Room service." I hung up, figuring it was a mistake. But a few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp knocks. Every instinct told me not to open it. I called out instead. "Yes." Silence. Then, slowly, the knocking resumed. This time softer, more deliberate. I crept to the peephole and looked through. The hallway was empty. Chills ran down my spine. I backed away from the door, sat on the bed, and tried to convince myself I was overtired. That's when the phone rang again. Same number, same voice. "Room service." This time, I didn't answer. I just unplugged the phone entirely. The silence that followed was deafening. I finally drifted off, only to wake around 3:20 a.m. The room was ice cold. My breath fogged in the air. At first, I thought the AC had broken, but then I noticed something worse. The door to the bathroom was open. I was sure I had closed it earlier. Inside, I could hear the faint sound of running water. My pulse spiked as I stepped closer. The sink faucet was on full blast, and on the mirror above it, in smeared condensation, were the words, "Let him in." My body locked. I turned off the faucet, grabbed my bag, and made for the door, but when I touched the handle, it burned. Ice cold, like grabbing dry ice. Then came a noise that still haunts me. The sound of a key sliding into the lock from the outside. The knob turned slowly. Someone was trying to come in. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The door handle jiggled, harder, harder, until the entire frame shook. Then it stopped. Dead silence. The room phone, which I had unplugged, rang. Loud, shrill, nonstop. I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the door open, ready to run. The hallway was pitch black. Every single light bulb burned out. Far at the end of the corridor, in the faint glow of an exit sign, stood a tall figure in a bellhop's uniform. His face was obscured by shadow, but he raised his hand and tapped something against the wall. Slow, rhythmic knocks, like the ones from earlier. I ran. I didn't wait for the elevator. I sprinted down 11 flights of stairs, suitcase banging against my leg, until I burst into the lobby. The clerk on duty stared at me like I was insane, but I didn't care. I left that night and never came back. Later, I tried to look up the hotel's history. Buried in old records, I found mention of a bellhop in the 1920s who had attacked guests, using his master key to enter their rooms in the middle of the night. He was caught, but not before several people vanished without a trace. Some say he still makes his rounds, and I will never forget his voice echoing through the phone line in the dead of night. Room service